Hi, my name's Liz and I'm an artist and educator here at Maitland Regional Art Gallery. And today I'm going to be taking you through an art making session inspired by this work here by Christopher Hodges called The Red Guard. This work is part of the Maitland Regional Art Gallery collection. So you can see that this sculpture is really big in scale and it's actually made out of cardboard, and he's painted it with this beautiful earthy red colour. It's a really beautiful example of how something so simple as cardboard being used as a material in art can be transformed into a big sculpture. You might like to take your time answering the following questions, remembering that there is no right or wrong answer, and I encourage you to be as imaginative and creative as you can with your answers. Why do you think that the title of the work is The Red Guard? And does the title affect the way that you interpret the work? What does the sculpture make you think of if you take into account the shape, the size, and the space that it takes up? Do you think that the artwork looks heavy, or do you think that it feels light? Do you think that this work would be best experienced inside a gallery or outside in nature? This sculpture is over 2 meters tall. Do you think that the size of the sculpture affects the meaning of the work? And do you like the artwork? Why or why not? If you could use one word to describe this sculpture, what would it be? We're going to move into the art making part of this video. So I'm going to run you through the different materials that you're going to need and how we're going to make our sculptures. So I'm going to take you through the art making part of this video, and we're going to be creating our very own sculpture. So before you start, make sure that you have a nice clean area to work in, and I'll run you through the different materials that we're going to need for this art making. So the first thing you're going to need is a pencil, and because we're making a sculpture out of cardboard, you can use a variety of materials depending on what you have around your house. So I've got some coloured paper. Some of it's quite thick, the other is just normal coloured paper. I've got some cardboard. This is just out of the recycling, so it's just a plain piece of cardboard. You don't want to use cardboard that's too thick, so something like a biscuit box is perfectly fine. I've also got some paint, because we're going to be creating coloured sculptures, but you can always use coloured cardboard instead of paint if you don't have any. And I've also got some random bits and bobs from around the place that we're going to sketch around. And also the last thing that you'll need is just a pair of scissors. So we're going to take our piece of cardboard or our thick piece of paper, and we're going to draw some interesting shapes on it. So you might like to draw some shapes, just some irregular round shapes. You can kind of create whatever shape you like, making them nice and big. Or if you need some ideas of some shapes to draw around, I've got just some soap here. So I'm just going to place that on my cardboard, and I'm just going to roughly trace around it. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Then I'm going to trace around this sticky tape dispenser because it's an interesting shape. And then perhaps this handheld stapler. Great. So I've got 4 shapes here, and then I'm simply just going to cut them out. So when you're cutting cardboard, something to make it a little bit easier is if you cut roughly around each shape, so I'm just going to cut this into a square. And then you can start getting a little bit closer to your lines. Perfect. So I've got my 4 shapes, and you might like to make a sculpture out of 2 shapes, 3 shapes, 10 shapes, completely up to you. So I've got my 4 shapes here, and now I'm going to start to add my colour. I'll run you through how to add some colour using just some coloured paper, and then we'll have a go at painting. So for the coloured paper, what I'm going to do is just place one of my shapes onto the coloured paper as close to the edge as possible. And then I'm just simply going to trace around the edge of it. And then I'm going to flip that shape over and trace around it again. And then I'm going to cut out those shapes out of my coloured paper. And then I'm going to take my glue and just cover one side of my shape with the glue, making sure that I'm taking the glue right up to each edge. And then I'm just going to take one of those colours and pop it on top. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit exactly, you can always trim it down later. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other side. So just flipping it over, popping some glue, making sure that I'm being nice and generous with the glue. And then gently pressing down. And there we have our first coloured part of our sculpture. I'm just going to trim off these cardboard edges so that it's a nice solid colour. Perfect. And then you can start to colour your other pieces. So you might pick the same colour, you might pick a different colour, or if you don't have coloured paper, you can always use paint to colour your shapes. So I'm just going to paint this one this nice red colour. So this is just an acrylic paint that I'm using. I'm just covering the whole shape. And there's pros and cons to both approaches. So this one is a lot faster application, but then you have to wait for the paint to dry. So I'll wait for that side to dry and then I'll just simply paint the other side. But for now, I'm just going to continue to cover the rest of my shapes with the coloured paper. And I've decided that I'm going to make this one yellow on one side and then orange on the other. And then I've got 3 really interesting shapes to work with. The next part is joining our sculpture together. So what I'm going to do is take my scissors and I'm going to cut some little slots into each shape. So you want to make the slots maybe 1 or 2 millimeters wide. So just maybe 1.5 centimeters in depth. And then we're going to make 3 slots just in random places at random angles in each shape. This way, we'll have lots of options when it comes to actually building our sculpture. Okay, so how you're going to put your sculpture together is using these slots here. So you can slot each of your shapes into one another and they hold really steadily like that. So this is the really fun part where you can kind of figure out what design you want your sculpture to be, and there are endless possibilities. You could try creating a sculpture with your 3 pieces like this, and then maybe I'll look at it at a different angle until I'm kind of happy with how it looks. You can always take it apart, experiment with new slots. Seeing what you can come up with. There's heaps of different options. And it's just about experimenting and finding one that you're really happy with, that you like the composition of. Just like that. Once you're happy with the shape of your sculpture that you've created, you might like to stop and reflect on the following questions. What title might you give your sculpture? And do you think that your sculpture would work well if it was recreated at a larger scale? How many colours have you used in your sculpture? And how many segments makes up your sculpture? As an extension activity, you might like to take some coloured pencils and do some drawings of your sculpture from different angles. Drawing your sculpture will give you a good sense of how the structure comes together and the different angles that it makes. Thanks for joining me in this art making session. I hope you've enjoyed making your very own sculpture inspired by Christopher Hodges' work, The Red Guard. You can access this video anytime, and there's an adjoining worksheet that you're welcome to work from as well.